All right, so then let's get to it now. We got 9 days until we have the inauguration.
And that's going to be a shit show, 100%.
All right, so yes, we've already had Trump now saying that he's not going to show up. I've not been watching the news today. I don't know whether they're really going to try to impeach him or not. Obviously, that was a lot of rhetoric over the weekend and possibility where they said they were going to try to use the 25th Amendment and get him out. What is your opinion on what's going on now and what we're going to see in just over a week?
All right. I mean, so basically, this impeachment thing is going to dominate what they're doing, and it's going to dominate the media narrative. And so they're also at the same time introducing these new domestic terror laws that, of course, are not going to get the same attention in mainstream media. So you're going to be hearing all about the impeachment trial, but not hearing about how the Domestic Terror Prevention Act or the other Domestic Terror Act, whose name I forget, that Adam Schiff wrote, those are all going to come back, and they'll likely be passed with modifications that are very disconcerting. And basically, those laws, when they tried to pass them previously, the ACLU pointed out that they would essentially criminalize all dissent against the government from any group, left, right, or anywhere on the political spectrum. So I think that they're going to be using the impeachment trial here as a huge distraction. A lot of what's happened also in the past several days has been very convenient for new news that has come out regarding the SolarWinds hack. So, for example, the day of the Capitol siege, which obviously the power structure knew was going to happen because they let it happen. And we didn't really talk much about that, but you can go, if people are interested, on my take on that. I did a video with T-Lav last week all about that. Sorry, I lost my train of thought.
No, you were talking. No problem. We were talking about everything gearing up into the inauguration, but how it went down into the Capitol, and we did talk
the SolarWinds thing. Sorry,
yes.
Yeah. So the same day as the siege on the Capitol, they announced that the Department of Justice very quietly announced, got no MSM coverage, that their email system had been almost entirely compromised by that hack. That's pretty wild. They're moving to push that hack on Russia. Who have they brought in the past couple days? CrowdStrike, Chris Krebs, who Trump fired in relation to the whole election thing, who's a former Microsoft guy and was running DHS's CISA, and also the former security officer of Facebook, have all been brought in to investigate the hack. At the same time, when we were told, anyway, that on January 6th, during the Capitol a computer potentially containing national security information was taken from the Capitol. I think that may be used to frame Trump supporters for whatever damage was actually done by the SolarWinds hack, and also to set up this justification, this narrative they've been setting for the war on domestic terror. I didn't talk about this aspect, but I think this what I'm bringing up here will be used to advance this, that the domestic terrorists here in the U.S. work with nation states. A lot of my work discussing this pivot by the national security state to domestic terrorism that I did last year pointed out that a lot of the narratives they've set up well in advance are claims that these right-wing extremists, domestic terrorists, whatever, are working with various nation states that happen to be adversaries of the U.S., whether it's Russia, whether it's Iran, China, whatever, even though, Trump supporters, they'd work with China and Iran when those are their personal boogeymen, right? But we're already hearing, sort of a setup for that. So, if information does get leaked out, for example, and they decide to blame it on whatever, maybe the original source was the SolarWinds hack. What they can do now, thanks to people like Chris Krebs and Facebook and all these people and CrowdStrike, right, being involved, can be like, well, this was the Trump supporters' fault, and now domestic terrorists have done this, blah, blah, blah. And they were working with Russia because they were already trying to blame the SolarWinds hack on Russia, but they don't have any evidence. They say it was likely Russia did it.
And again, that's the same narrative that they were pushing just about a month ago while I was in D.C. the first time, and then you had that other hack. And again, sources are telling us it's Russia. Same exact thing. Again, you predicted before the election even took place that we would be talking about not only domestic terror, but cyber attacks, just like the Great Reset crowd. Continue.
Yeah, and I forgot where I was going to go.
You were at SolarWinds and you were talking
something else. Oh, what was that?
You were at SolarWinds and you were talking about basically how they were pinning this on Russia working with domestic terror threats, some that may have infiltrated the Capitol.
They're going to be using that going forward, saying the domestic terrorists, the domestic extremists here either have a global network or they're tied up with nation state actors. So that we're going to hear that going forward. And this whole cyber attack thing, We're going to be hearing more about that coming up soon. It's worth pointing out that some people have made the claim that all of this stuff with QAnon, like the storm is coming, was actually neuro-linguistic programming for the storming of the Capitol that just happened. And if you want to follow that theory, what the QAnon people believe follows the storm are 7 days of darkness, a blackout that lasts a week in the US where all the bad pedophiles are rounded up. So at the same time, though, we had Lynn Wood not long after the events of January 6th come out and say that the blackout is imminent in the US. That's a little interesting. And of course, we have the World Economic Forum talking about the power grids are going to go down. There's going to be a cyber pandemic or a cyber attack and all of this stuff. So it definitely, I did a lot of work on that last year, so I don't want to go too deep into it, but it's definitely worth considering that stuff and considering the other things that are not being covered because of the extreme media attention on the events of January 6th and the other things they may potentially be setting up. But at the same time, MSM has made it very clear that there's going to be some sort of event on the 20th. There may even be one slightly before. It really remains to be seen. But basically what happened on January 6th is not enough for them to justify, in my opinion, their Patriot Act 2.0 and a lot of the other legislation and the other systems that they have ready and they want to implement. They need more outrage. So this is what I would call January 6th, and I said this on Twitter, I really think is the opening act, and we're going to see more of these events pop up so that they can manufacture consent, sort of like 9/11 style, for this legislation. So keep in mind, too, going back to 9/11 and the parallels, between then and now, I'm not comparing January 6th necessarily to 9/11, but you have to keep in mind, too, 9/11 happened, and that wasn't necessarily enough to pass the Patriot Act either. What had to happen was this fear generated by what followed 9/11, the anthrax attacks, and that was framed by the media to the American public as this is the new normal. Terrorism in the homeland is the new normal, right? So now I think what will happen is that there will be more events, whether they're the results of entrapment or the results of these policies that have followed January 6th that are obviously going to make these same people feel really even more disenfranchised and angry at a time when there's an extreme economic recession and lockdowns and all of this stuff. It doesn't really matter what causes it, but I think we're going to see more events that are going to be used to push this system through and shove it down everyone's throats. Because I don't think they reached that point yet just with the January 6th thing, despite the fact that they've been repeating it, that same footage ad nauseum since Wednesday and doing the same talking points and saying insurrection, all these people in Congress nearly died, and it was a coup attempt, which is totally insane when you think about the coup attempts the CIA has done abroad. Or
what actual justice or street justice looks like throughout history. Mussolini, anyone? I mean, you look at Mussolini, and I always say this, I feel like the Predator class, when they saw how close and what happened to Mussolini, they said never again. Never are we going to have a Western frontman again done that, because Mussolini looked like not even a rag doll. Like after he was done, I mean, he didn't even look human. They hung him in the public square. Did that happen? Nothing even close to that happened. Nothing even close. And you look at even, things that happened in the 80s, 90s, modern day in South America. You could call those people's insurrections for sure. And to equate that with this is total insanity. But just like you said, you're not saying this is a 9/11 style event. You're saying the impact that will come after it because of the media frame up could be,
they need more events is my point. Mm-hmm. And they've already set up, if you listen carefully or read MSM articles that have come out January 6th, they're all pointing to these same people responsible for this insurrection and this coup attempt and the siege or whatever are going to do something on January 20th. So they're essentially telling you, just like they told you last year, DHS told you last year that another 9/11 was coming and we can see it building, but we can't stop it, meaning they're going to let it happen or they're going to enable it directly, one of the two, right? And so where are we now? The fact that what happened on January 6th is what it was, and you have people like Charles Schumer comparing it to Pearl Harbor,
just like 9/11,
a big deal to people. The fact that they're using those terms to describe it, and also, in my opinion, too, a lot of what happened on January 6th was really just a media spectacle. In a lot of ways, They wanted footage and they wanted pictures that they could use to really open the scene for this bigger push they want to do. And so if anything happens on January 20th, all of the stuff they've been setting up since Wednesday to now on the MSM is just it's like going to pour gasoline on that fire, basically.
So am I going back to DC on the 20th?
Stop the transition. Then the whole thing, this is a coup attempt, will come up again. And it's the same building. I don't think it's any coincidence that inauguration takes place in front of the Capitol building and that it was the Capitol that was stormed on Wednesday.
So I go back on the 20th or what? Do I go back to DC again or should I be there?
No, I don't. I honestly don't recommend it because if you've noticed something, well, this is just my opinion.
I'm listening.
If you notice something that has followed a lot of these events, even from Election Day on, there has been these claims in MSM about QAnon extremists and bombs. So if you go back, for example, and so I think it's very possible we could see some Oklahoma City style thing at some point this year, not necessarily on Inauguration Day, but later on to sort of kick this into overdrive, right? And that's important to anyone that doesn't know about Oklahoma City bombing. I recommend watching James Corbett's work on that so you can see what happened there. It was a false flag, and it was used to create a right-wing domestic terror boogeyman, basically that was a veteran also. So, and who claimed to have a chip in his brain. That's pretty weird.
And be working for Black Ops. Yeah. And be working for Black Ops. And it was so bizarre how on
very
video.
Bizarre background.
Yeah, you had all those bombs being taken out, and then you had the governor, Tom Keating, on television confirm the bombs were being taken out.
And then he was in Dark Winter, Keating.
And guys, I actually have a large section in Invisible Empire on that very thing because the publicly available evidence will make your head spin on what actually happened at the Alpha P Murrah building
a lot of
Well, I'm just saying that was pre-Bin Laden, pre-war on terror, but getting you ready. You know, one of the first things I said on the morning of 9/11 when I realized what was happening, and my neighbor said, well, they already know it's that motherfucker Bin Laden. And I go, well, it's pretty early. And I go, didn't a crazy white guy do Oklahoma City? You know, because again, I had bought into that narrative at that time. He's like, well, that's not this. And boy, you fall down that rabbit hole and none of it's what they perceive. Go ahead.
Well, it's worth pointing out, too, a lot of the people that have been setting up publicly this need for the war on domestic terror, like DHS's Elizabeth Newman, who had another 9/11 is coming quote, also has repeatedly in the past year invoked the Oklahoma City bombing. So what do we have happen after the election? If you go back and watch my election special with T-Lav, the third one's about Philadelphia. While they were counting ballots in Philadelphia, which was very contentious because of the situation, the fraud accusations and whatever that were going on in that particular city at the time, you had a truck allegedly come from Virginia with QAnon bumper stickers on it. And that whole convention center where the vote counting was going on was evacuated at that time because of an alleged bomb threat. And they investigated these guys. Right. I've never heard of anything coming of that, but it was going on Twitter at the time. Some people were being like, oh, my God, QAnon terrorists are going to bomb the people counting the votes. OK, so that didn't result in an actual explosion or anything, but it was one of many things that have followed since then. And of course, more recently, right, we have January 6th. There were bombs allegedly there. And what's crazy as hell is that this one guy who was from Alabama, who they know and they've charged, CNN and all these other sources are claiming that he had a truck full of explosives. He was only charged for the firearms he was carrying. Why the hell did they not charge him for the bomb?
Is that the guy with the 11 Molotov cocktails? Because I've seen. All right. I've seen that.
It's been repeated in MSM as this guy had bombs and had plans to bomb Congress. Okay, but if that is so awful, why did they not charge him for having that in his vehicle? Why did they just charge him for having like an unregistered handgun?
Yeah, it was weird because I saw that picture and it's hard to tell what they are because obviously a Molotov cocktail, you know, when it's lit, you have the actual rag in it, you're setting it on fire. It looked like jars of something. I don't know exactly.
Well, allegedly, it was homemade napalm. So it was styrofoam and gasoline. But federal prosecutors framed it in their indictment as explosive material, but they don't charge them for that. Mm-hmm. And then CNN and MSNBC and all of these outlets run with it. And they're like, oh, they were going to blow up the Capitol. They were going to napalm the Capitol. But the person they're using for that narrative wasn't even charged for having that material in his vehicle, and they know who he is and they've arrested him for other stuff. I mean, it just seems a
Odd.
little strange,
Mm-hmm.
right? And, I mean, this whole bomb thing has been, they've been building this for a while, saying like, oh, these people work with explosives, or the white supremacists, and it's not just that. They've also been sort of over the past year, not just in the US, but in some other countries, claiming that white supremacists and domestic terrorists are going to weaponize COVID-19 or conduct some sort of bioterror event in coordination with a nation state against the US, allegedly Iran. And that's coming from people tied up to the ADL. And as I mentioned earlier, the ADL is really central to a lot of what's being set up here. So it's definitely, those are some things to look at going forward. But, what's really important here, and what I've been trying to do since before the election, is try and preempt some of these narratives. So I look at the narratives the intelligence agencies are pointing out, the front companies are pointing out, the think tanks are pointing out in the US and allied countries like the UK and Israel and whatever. And I try and see what they're trying to set you up to believe, and trying to expose that, to air that out before an event like that can happen. Because the best thing we can do is preempt that narrative because of the huge censorship push that's going on right now. Because this isn't like 9/11, where we have a couple decades to investigate and point things out and try and get that information out to the public. We're being deplatformed faster than ever. That is not going to slow down. It's only going to pick up, and it's only going to get crazier. I really want to stress that. And it's going to be done by AI in a couple months, the deplatforming, by the people that brought you the AI to track insurgents in Iraq are now going to track disinformation for COVID-19 and other stuff on behalf of the U.S. Air Force, automatically deplatform you. They turned that in March or April of this year. So after that, deplatforming is going to get really fun, I guess. And by fun, I mean not fun, but
that's why I actually backed my channel up yesterday. I started doing it on Odyssey through Library, just so that all those videos, and I recommend other people do it just to have the backup on your work, because, I have hard copies. What?
Not only that, but the Wayback Machine has also been compromised now, and they're about to take stuff off there or put on fact-checking warnings on sites. I think it is really imperative that some sort of collective gets started where people start physically storing important research in important sources from the internet before they scrub stuff. I am convinced they're going to start scrubbing Epstein stuff very soon.
I think you're right. I think they've been scrubbing a lot of stuff on top of 9/11, Epstein, Mossad connections. I mean, a lot of these things, even Jim Jones. I noticed, so funny. So I recently did a video on Jim Jones, his connections to mind control, the FBI, all these different things. And I had the damnedest time trying to find these old articles, like hard copies that I used to have.
Yeah.
And it's funny, I've been backing up my stuff off of old hard drives, and I was looking just through PSD files, and I literally came into my Jim Jones folder from like a decade ago. And I'm like, where are all these? I mean, it's like, Jim Jones has plethora of mind control drugs. Like this whole article in the thing. Can't find it anywhere. Whitney Webb, if I didn't have family over, I could go forever, but I do. And
All right.
Well, my cousin came into town. I saw him a couple years ago, and
You don't have to explain. It's fine. I have a toddler. I get it.
What? I know you get it. But with that said, I want to get you on post-inauguration as soon as possible. I'll hit you up, of course. I know you're very, very busy. End it with anything you want, and then let my audience know what the best way to support you is. Not only just in unlimitedhangout.com, but Unlimited Hangout on Rockfin and all these other platforms. So end with what you like and let my audience know.
Okay, so I guess there's a lot of ways I could go for last words here, but what I really want to stress, the next 9 days are crucial. You need to find alternative platforms, not just for consuming news content, but also for communicating. There are some messaging apps that work in the event of an internet shutdown. It's possible the government may shut down the internet temporarily, maybe not the power grid if you still want to communicate with people through your phone. There are apps that you can use to do that. We really need to start thinking about this stuff seriously. What will you do if the internet gets shut down? What will you do if there's a power blackout? It's time to make these plans now and talk to your friends and family. A lot of the stuff is very likely to happen. And we have really 9 days, whether an event happens on January 20th or not. I think it seems really likely, but the Biden administration is going to come in on January 20th, and they are going to steamroll your civil liberties. And I mean, they're going to go nuts. They have power over Congress. They have a supermajority. They have the presidency. They have the uniparty backing now of the establishment wing of both parties. Silicon Valley, which by and large has a huge dominance over speech and really public thought by extension in the US. I mean, they feel like nothing can stop them. So it's really important that we start planning for that now. The greater resistance you and other people talk about, Jason, the planning for that must happen in the next 9 days. The groundwork for that has to be set up in the next 9 days, or you're not going to have a chance to do it online.
I 100% agree. 100% agree. Again, Whitney, I got to get you on in a couple weeks. I'll be watching your stuff. You know, I check in every once in a while. I read the stuff. Obviously, it's not for the faint-hearted, guys. But I'll tell you right now, reality isn't for the faint-hearted. And it's time to step up. It's time to get off the message boards. It's time to unhook the needle from the vein of hopium and be your own hero. Because if you don't, like you said, and we don't move quick, we're not going to have...
And it's hard. I mean, it's hard. And this is why I think so many QAnon people got roped into, like, realizing a lot of stuff all at the same time about how the government works in 2015, 2016. It's easy to get suckered in to sort of narratives like QAnon, maybe if you'd never been exposed to that information before. Waking up to the reality that the U.S. national security state is actually the world's largest terrorist organization, and not Al-Qaeda and not ISIS, and that it's our freaking government and you're paying taxes to that, is hard for a lot of people. But, you know, this is, you know, not just an external reckoning, it's an internal reckoning too. We as a society have to stop being, for lack of a better word, pussies. Sorry, but we have to, you know, stand up and be like, this is how things are. It sucks. It's awful. We have to look it in the face or we'll never fix it, period. We'll never fix it. We'll never get out of it. And we will drown in this hell they're trying to create. And if you don't want that to happen, it's time to look this stuff in the face if you haven't already, and be there to support people who are having a hard time with it. I think that's really important too. You know, some people like PLAV, my Patreon, right? We have like Discord chats, for example, where people a lot of times end up having to use that for support because they don't know other people that think this way and have a really hard time dealing with it. You know, we really need to take those steps and do it. And I also think that it's really important that we're as compassionate as possible with regular people, because, you know, our enemy, we have to remember who the real enemy is, and it's the elites. It's the intelligence agencies that they control, and it's their political puppets in Congress and, you know, in the presidential administrations. You know, it's not the person next to you. Even if they say stuff that offends you, we have to remember who the real enemy is at all times, period.
100%. Whitney Webb, she's the best, everybody. Again, unlimitedhangout.com, unlimited hangout on Rockfin right here. You rock, Whitney. We'll talk soon.
Thanks.
All right, later, Whitney Webb. Guys, she is the best. I want to say thank you to all of the tips today because there's been a bunch. Patty Weimers, always supporting the program. John Little, thank you so much. Joni, thank you so much. Jeffrey Lerner, thank you so much. Cheryl Wamsley, thank you so much. Matt, thank you so much. Paula, Akbar, and Kelly Green, really appreciate it. Again, I want to just go through it before we leave. Unlimitedhangout.com. Follow her on Twitter @_Whitney Webb. It was right there the whole time, guys. Remember to Rockfin. This is going to be up for a couple days free, and then it'll become premium. Probably going to cut some of this up and put it on the YouTube. Okay, check out all the documentary films free in the playlist section over at YouTube. Loose Change, Final Cut, Fabled Enemies, Invisible Empire, A New World Order Defined, and Shade the Motion Picture. And if you can, guys, this is how we really do it. GoFundMe, $5, $10, $15. Big donors, you mean the world to me. We're going to keep it up. We're going to keep on the ground reporting, and we're going to keep up great interviews like this one. I absolutely love you guys, and we'll see you all on the flip side.